Hello, folks. So today we have a very special guest with us, and I thought, let me bring him on my channel, have a chat with him, do a little interview. In fact, it's somebody that I've known very well. We met years ago. I want to say 2017. In fact, it was an astrology conference. His name is Vish Chatterji, and he is educated as an engineer. He was in the corporate world for about 20 years because he got an MBA after his engineering degree. So he spent 20 years in the corporate world. Then he was into coaching. And then from there, he went to become an astrologer, and a very good one. In fact, recently, he was asked to write a book on astrology, and he launched that book just this week. So we're gonna talk about the book as well, and I'm gonna actually leave it to him now to introduce himself. Yeah.
Thank you, Anahita. Thank you for your kind introduction. I'm so excited to be here and to talk to you and have all of your YouTube followers sort of have a voyeuristic peek into our conversation. Yeah, I met you in the elevator of the United Astrology Conference in Chicago. Yeah, about what 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember because that was a conference of thousands of astrologers, but mostly Western.
Yeah.
And there was this small little group of a couple of hundred of hundred people, I think, that were Vedic astrologers. And we went in the elevator, and a common friend of ours was there.
Yeah.
He said, "Hey, where's your moon?" And I said, "Oh," I said, "My moon is in Parni." And you said, "Oh, my moon's in Parni. Come on, let's go."
So, let's go have lunch. Let's go have lunch. Yeah. And it was me, you, and it was Santip, right?
And Santip, yeah. And so we went and had lunch and had just an amazing lunch.
Yeah.
And, at the time, it just seemed like an innocent lunch in some restaurant downtown Chicago on Michigan Avenue, bantering about astrology. But I think that lunch changed my life. So from my point of view, it really changed and unlocked a lot on my journey because I ended up going a lot deeper into astrology after that conference, but also with Santipji specifically.
Yeah.
And here I am now, just 3 days ago, launching a book on astrology. So from lunch to a published book on Vedic astrology.
Yeah.
This came out on Tuesday. And so I'm really honored to be on your show today of all days, right? And of course, just following Diwali and
happy Diwali. Yes.
Yeah, happy Diwali. So yeah. You asked me to introduce myself. I think you did justice. I was an engineer, and then in the auto industry, I was an engine engineer. I used to work on engines specifically, and then went to business school, got my MBA, went into management in the auto industry. And when the auto industry went through a bit of a downturn in 2008, I jumped into the tech industry and had an incredible journey in tech, rose up the ranks, started divisions of companies, managed large businesses, and then decided to finally, do it for real and do a startup. So I did the California dream, tech entrepreneur, start a company, raise capital, get early revenue, and the whole thing went big, 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 and then like Rahu style exploded and ended up in tatters. And from that misery, I picked myself up and decided to start coaching. And it was through my coaching practice that I started going deeper into understanding how to develop leaders, how to develop human beings, went deeper into my yoga tradition and ancestry that I've been connected to. And then from yoga, found Ayurveda, went deep into Ayurveda, and from Ayurveda, discovered this secret science of Jyotish.
Yes. And tell us, you were based in California, yes?
Yes, I'm in Redondo Beach, California, and I've been here since that 2008 shift from automotive to tech.
Okay, great. And you were born in Hong Kong?
Yes, I was born in Hong Kong, and I was born to an Indian family, a Bengali family. My mom and dad were both originally Bengali, and they moved to Hong Kong during Indira Gandhi's emergency time when things were really tough in India. And they sort of set up a new life in Hong Kong, and I was born there. And, I always thought Hong Kong was an amazing place. And my dad always said to me, "This is just a dot on the map, son. There's no future for you here. one day you must go to America. So, so
Right.
since a tiny, little toddler, I knew America as the golden land and to come there
Yeah.
one day.
I mean, a lot of Indian kids are taught that actually.
Enamored. And we, my dad talked about that, and we watched lots of cowboy movies. So
Mm,
he
mm.
said, "See, look, America. It's so Wild West." And we'd watch all these cowboy movies, and so I grew up thinking America was like, cowboys and guns on their hips. Turns out these days there are a lot of guns on the hips too. So.
Yeah. Things have changed, definitely, definitely. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your book. Hold up that book again, because I want to give that
Yeah.
title. You said it's Astrology Decoded: Secret Science of India's Sages. Yes?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, what does that mean? So what's like what do you mean by who are India's sages?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? When you look at all of the Western sort of traditions and Western teachings in the Western world, there's always some person that claims ownership. They say, "Oh, this is my system, and I've come up with this,
Right.
5 steps to be a great leader, or 10 steps to be a great husband, or whatever." And the Indian system, if you look at the yoga system, the Vedic astrology system, the Ayurveda system, there really isn't one owner. There are people that have written treatises on the subjects to help explain them, but they don't claim ownership. So we all sort of see ourselves in the Vedic tradition as these temporary custodians or temporary vessels of knowledge, but the knowledge isn't ours. Like, it's not my system. So I'm not going to sit here and trademark a Vedic astrology system and say, "Oh, it's Vish's system." I'm just another one in a long line of people who are trying to understand the system. But the original system does relate back to, I believe, the 7 rishis. So in all Indian families, we all know almost like the clan that we're from, who was the original progenitor of our clan.
Mm,
So we say that these people who are the rishis, and there were 7 of them, the Sapta rishis. Many of you have heard that term. And the word rishi is almost like the best translation is a seer, somebody who sees. But
mm,
what is it that they see? Because it's not so much that they see, but they hear. They also
mm,
hear.
mm.
And I believe these were people that were very, very close to God. Like, they just almost like the first original origination of humankind. And they had the power to, in deep states of meditation, literally hear
Sure.
the secrets of the universe.
And
And
very much connected to nature, right? Like that was how they lived. Yeah.
yeah, they were in nature, right? They lived in nature. They understood how nature worked. And they would hear these sort of, I guess, frameworks of how consciousness works.
Mm,
And I'm sure they debated along the way and they came up with these systems, right? Of the yoga system, the Vedic astrology system, the Vedic philosophy system, the system of mind body medicine. And then at some point, this started to get transmitted down in oral tradition. So they would speak and share. And for thousands of years, from generation to generation, the teachings were just taught in spoken form. So you
yeah.
kind of see like some degradation of fidelity. You hear it from the universe and you know it, but now as you start to speak it, you lose some of that fidelity. But it's still spoken and it's still quite well preserved, let's say 90% or 80%. Then, after thousands of years of that, I believe about 5,000 years ago, they decided to write this down. And
Mm,
now, when you've gone to a hearing, to a speaking, to a written, some more fidelity is lost.
sure.
But that is the canon of text we call the Vedas. So the Vedas are original, some of the oldest writings known to humankind. And in those writings, they describe, literally the nature of the universe and how you as a human being can connect to the universe and become more conscious. And then those writings, through subsequent, India being ruled by various colonizing forces, a lot of these writings got lost along the way, suppressed along the way, lost, burnt, destroyed, and some small segment of that. So now you went from hearing it to speaking it to writing it to a bunch of writing lost. And then that consciousness also degraded a long time. So now here we are in our modern world with our more limited consciousness trying to interpret a subset of written texts and trying to understand these systems. And that's where we are today. So when I say sages, I'm talking about the original rishis of India who had literally the keys to understanding human consciousness.
Right. So let's talk about a little bit of a controversial subject, but we have to bring it up because it's connected. It kind of goes hand in hand with your book, and that is, isn't Jyotish supposed to be kept secret? Like, how do you feel about sharing this knowledge?
Yeah. So I have been a yogi for the past 25 years. I've been a practitioner of the yoga system. And, in yoga, I understand the yoga system deeply. And in that, there are many teachings that are secret. Because when you practice certain yoga techniques, in the wrong hands, they become dangerous. In the wrong hands, they can create a lot of power for an individual who can't handle that power. Almost like an asura, where you have this amazing power to manipulate things, but then you're using it for bad purpose. So a lot of the yoga teachings were kept secret for that reason, because not everyone is ready. And so when people are ready, then they can access that knowledge. And I believe that's correct. It should be kept secret. It's in the wrong hands, it's dangerous. Part of the secrecy is also things were lost along the way. So they became secret just by virtue of being lost. But then does that mean that no one should ever have access to that system at all, even in infant form? Should a person who's stressed out in modern society, should they not be taught how to breathe and meditate?
Sure.
Huge transformational benefits on that thing. Should no one be allowed to even begin the journey? So I do believe that all of our Vedic system are systems that have the entry level on-ramp and then the super highway. And maybe the super highway knowledge needs to remain secret for the right people at the right time when they're ready, when their consciousness can handle it. And then the rest of it, make it more approachable. And I saw this in the yoga world with a lot of the Kundalini practitioners, right? They try to, through Kundalini yoga, they almost like trick themselves into Kundalini access, but then they can't handle it because their body and system isn't ready. And they called it in the 70s and 80s Kundalini psychosis. So people have very serious psychological issues accessing a secret that they shouldn't have had.
I read about that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I believe in Jyotish the same thing. Jyotish has many, many secret techniques that are very powerful that really shouldn't be shared or revealed until people are ready. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't have the on-ramp. That doesn't mean that people should live with some more consciousness. So my goal in sharing the secrets is to give a very entry level that, hey, you as a human being, you have been ignorant of this basic fact that your human existence is connected to the sun, the moon, Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, all Rahu, Ketu, all the planets, right? So just be aware and conscious that these planets are acting around you. They're influencing your life, and live with a little bit more awareness and consciousness. That's it. You don't need to make everybody have the ability to read a chart. You don't have to force everybody to go see an astrologer. Just have some basic consciousness. Just like in yoga, teach breathing meditation. In Jyotish, teach about, hey, there's 9 planets. There's 12 signs. You can understand yourself better with that. Does that make sense?
And that's the audience. Yeah, that's the audience you're appealing to with this book, right? The ones that don't have any knowledge or have very little knowledge. Yes?
Yes, and with the Indian system, a lot of our mythology, a lot of our stories are coded, right? So somebody who's a complete beginner hears a story and they get one access and one level of information. Right. Somebody who's more advanced, they hear the same story, but they get more information. So in a way, this book is filled with mythology and stories that help teach a beginner the basics, but also for a practitioner, it's going to activate higher realms of knowledge for them, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. It can appeal to a wide range of people.
I believe so, yeah. And the other thing is, one of my frustrations was there's all these people doing yoga, and it's actually somebody in Portugal that sort of tipped that triggered that for me. There's a well-known yoga teacher in Lisbon who is a yogi, right? And posts on Instagram all the time about her yoga work and this and that, but then kept talking about Western astrology and, the moon is in Leo, but wait, the moon's actually in Cancer this day, or what, like everything's off, right? Or one sign over. So I said, hey, how can you as a yoga person, a person going deep into the yoga system, why wouldn't you look at Vedic astrology? Like, it doesn't make sense. Why are you in this Western thing? And I started to learn that, Western astrology is more accessible, right? You pick up a newspaper, pick up a magazine, you figure out the month you're born. You're like, oh yeah, it kind of lines up to me, and then you go tell
Well,
everybody.
it goes to a wider group of people, like irrespective of if you're Indian or not. I mean, if you go to India, you ask the average person, they will connect with the Western system. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm a sun in Leo. Yeah, I'm Leo because my sun is in Leo. So it appeals to a wider range of people because Western has been touted and talked about and marketed for so very long, right? Like everybody knows where their sun is in Western astrology, right?
I mean, that is so triggering to me because I was in India looking for books
Yeah,
on palmistry,
yeah,
and every book, Indian writers on palmistry, they're using like some Western,
yeah,
odd interpretation of it. And then you're right. You meet somebody on the street in India, and they're talking about their sun in Leo, and it's like, well, that's not the case. Your son was actually in Cancer, right?
right.
So it's this whole thing where, what happened? What
Yeah.
happened? Where
And
did we
how long
lose?
ago? And can we like go back? No, it's going to be a slow kind of like, and by the way, that rectification is happening where people are becoming more and more, and even Western astrologers, if you notice, there's Western astrologers, they're using Jyotish concepts when they talk about Western astrology, they're not giving credit to it, but it makes it sound a lot more deeper because it adds layers to their analysis, right?
Yeah.
Like 10, 15 years ago, you didn't hear a Western astrologer talk about, your seventh lord is here. You didn't hear that. Now you're
Like
hearing,
they didn't have the Lord concept. They didn't
right,
they didn't
right,
connect a sign to have a planetary Lord. And so
exactly.
part of my motivation with the book was, how do I insert
Yeah.
Vedic astrology into the mainstream conversation? How
Mm.
do I have a mainstream everyday person understand that, hey, there's this other system out there. It's very sophisticated and it's very tailored to you. So that was one of the goals. And the other goal was that, I do readings for clients. And after reading, they're like, oh my God, that was amazing. I can't believe how much insight I got. I want to learn more. Where do I go?
Yeah.
And every book that I could recommend out there, they're confused by chapter 2. They're like, I'm confused. I don't know what's going on here. I give up. Let me go back to Western astrology because I can follow.
That's actually that's very, very true. The community, because there's excellent Indian astrologers out there, but the communication can be a little bit cryptic. And I know because I've read their books, and I'm talking about really famous astrologers that have written. But yeah, that's a key, right? Because yes, the knowledge is deep and it's significant, and it can really like open up the world to you in terms of your self-awareness and self-understanding. But if the vocabulary that's being used isn't communicating with you, like it's not connecting with you, then you will stop it. As you said, you will stop at chapter 2, right? Like you.
Exactly. And even if I have a lower level of knowledge than the luminaries, the ability to explain and communicate and make it relevant for that individual is
Yeah,
life changing. And so my purpose with the book was, how do I give a very simple, accessible on ramp book that
yeah,
helps you just as an outsider to astrology, as a client of an astrologer, to just understand what's going on. And of course, if the subject takes you and you're enamored, this on ramp will then lead to a highway, which will then lead to a superhighway. And there's other books that do that. But this was that on-ramp book, and I haven't found one like it. And so I'm really proud that it's out, and it launched on Tuesday, and in 24 hours it hit the #1 best-selling astrology book on Amazon.
oh my goodness.
And it, out of all astrology books, I mean, there's thousands of them, and so it's been a bestseller all week, because I think there's a real appetite and a thirst to learn about.
Amazing. So if anybody wants to purchase it, they can just go to Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon worldwide. It globally launched on Tuesday. Wherever Amazon is, they definitely have it. And
Amazing.
if you're a country that is adjacent to Amazon country, then I think Amazon usually ships to you. But
Amazing.
the booksellers of the world all have them. Any big bookseller has them. So
Okay, so anyone, if you want to buy the book, please just simply go on Amazon, buy it online. You'll get it delivered to you. Now, here's the thing. I mean, we're talking about astrology. We're both very enthusiastic about the subject, and have been delving deeply. We've been giving readings, consultations. I mean, I've also designed courses. So we're very, very much in our journey. As we used to do something else. I also used to be a lawyer. I still somewhat do it, but more or less I do astrology now. So, and both of us are coming from a similar background in that we did something completely different. Now, I know that you used to be quite skeptical about astrology.
Yeah.
So when did that shift happen, and how did that, like, was there a moment that that shift happened, or when did it happen, and like, how did that come about?
Yeah, there was a moment. It was in Santa Cruz, California, on a sunny day in Dr. Suhas's office, Dr. Suhas Shirsagar, who's an Ayurvedic physician. I had two sources of skepticism. One was I grew up in a very, well, first of all, I grew up in a British colony in Hong Kong, and my mother and father were Bengalis that grew up under British rule in India and connected to Calcutta, which was the seat of the British Empire of India, right? And so we were almost, I would say, 4 or 5 generations ago, maybe earlier, right? The British ruled for 250 years. Generations, at least 5 or 6 generations, my family were in the top positions in Indian society, put in place by the British, brainwashed by the British to think a certain way. And we were taught to kind of look down on this backwater, superstitious, mumbo jumbo ritual stuff. So I'll tell you, growing up, I saw my parents do puja every morning, but in a very, very simplified, watered down way, enough to fit in before
Yeah.
they put on their suit and tie and went to the office, right? And we barely know many of the Brahmin sort of responsibilities in modern Brahmin families in North India, especially. The closer you were to the British rule, the more distant you became from the Indian culture. Anything Indian was backwater and superstitious and mumbo jumbo, and anything Western is top class, right?
Yeah.
Then, of course, I'm trained as an engineer. So even more so, I'm like, where's the science? It doesn't make sense. Like, this is hocus pocus. You tell me about astrology, that's nonsense. Like, it's like, what are you talking about? That's hocus pocus. So I had my engineering career, my executive career, then went into coaching, started coaching leaders. And I was noticing a link between management training in the corporate world. I worked for Mercedes for a while, Mercedes-Benz, and they used to take us to these intensive executive management training programs. And I thought everything they're teaching you about being a good leader shows up in the yoga system. Yoga is a way to develop yourself. Management leadership training is to develop yourself as a leader. I'm like, I think there's a connection here. And so I started bringing in a lot of yoga philosophy and yoga teachings into my executive coaching. And I wrote a book 5 years ago called The Business Casual Yogi. And it was this whole thing of taking the Ayurveda system, the yoga system, and bringing it to everyday leaders in the corporate world. And what I would do is, because of that Ayurveda training, if you came to my office as a leader, I would give you a questionnaire to fill out to figure out your mind-body constitution. In Sanskrit, we call it dosha. What is your dosha? And normally you figure out the dosha to figure out medical and health challenges. But I use doshas to figure out how you lead. How do you lead a team? How do you lead yourself? And based on your dosha, I would give you practical tips on lifestyle, diet, schedule, when to do different kinds of work in order to be a better leader. But, in the corporate world, everybody wants to be the type A because that's what gets you promoted.
Sure.
So when I would give the questionnaire, 90% of my clients were coming up as pitta, fiery, type A. And I'm like, that's not right. What I'm seeing in front of me, the energy I'm seeing in front of me does not line up with pitta. But they're filling out the questionnaire saying, look, I'm a pitta. Look how great a leader I am. I'm like, something's wrong here. So I go to my Ayurvedic teacher, who is Dr. Suhas, and Santa Cruz in his office. We're sitting there. And I said, look, I think my clients are cheating on the questionnaire. What do I do? And so he said, oh, you just look at their birth chart. Then you'll know exactly who they are. And I'm like, what do you mean by birth chart? He's like, their Jyotish chart. I said, what is Jyotish? He said, astrology. I said, astrology? That nonsense? I'm a scientist. I'm an engineer. You're going to tell me to start using astrology? He's like, no, just try it. Just try it. And I trust him. He's a super smart guy, world-renowned doctor and teacher. So a few clients that I trusted, I said, give me your birth information. Can you tell me when you were born, what time, look it up? And so I pull up their birth chart and I'd be like, wow, it's tracking. If I analyze the first house, I'm literally seeing their prakriti, their dosha. And then when I ask them a question, they'd be like, Vish, how do you know that? How do you know that about me? Like, I've been trying to hide that part of me forever. Like, how do you know this? science of it became very attractive to me. And I think my skepticism was because Western astrology is not accurate to the sky. And as soon as you correct the math to the accurate positions of the stars in the sky, all of a sudden the engineer's mind is satisfied. And I think that's why a lot of logical, technical-minded people like lawyers and engineers and doctors in India go into Vedic astrology, because it satisfies your scientific brain when you do it correctly, right?
Yeah, yeah, indeed. And also, another point I want to make is people are a lot more receptive to it nowadays, right? Like in our parents' generation, there was more of that prejudice, like you said. This is mumbo jumbo. It's not a real job. What are you doing? We've given you an education. Are you going to throw it away and do this? Like it's not a real career. However, that's changing, right? Like it's changed already, and I see that even more changing. Isn't it interesting? Like when I had met Sanjay Rath in London, I used to go to those conferences that they had there, and we had lunch in a big group once, and he was telling me about his career as in the Indian government, and it turned out that my father worked in the same office that he used to
Oh,
work.
wow.
Yeah, and it was a very like it was the branch of the Indian government that was in charge of buying and selling military equipment. Like it was very high prestigious, kind of like confidential type
Yeah.
of work, and he was saying a lot of people from that office were into astrology, because like you just get
We're into it.
because you just get so jaded.
Oh, yeah.
Get so jaded, right? And with your life and your career, and then like, what is this? Is this all there is to life? You think, is this all there is to life? And God forbid something happens in your life that completely derails your path, which happened with my father, which is how he got into it. It was because of his life events that he just couldn't make sense of. He couldn't make sense of them. And then he's like, well, wait a second. This doesn't make any sense. I've done this. This should not be happening. What is this? Sure enough, the astrology explained it to a T. And that's when he started to become a believer. He wasn't a believer before. He was like you said, like he had the scientific mind. He rejected it completely. Yeah, he rejected it completely.
Yeah, and I still have some degree of skepticism, but I keep getting proved wrong every time, right? Like I look at a chart, I add something up, and I say to the client, I'm like, well, I kind of see this, and then they're like, oh my God, how did you know that? I'm like, what? That's crazy. And so this week was interesting because I'm primarily an executive coach, so I work with corporate CEOs and executives. I do some small business owners, and then I have a group of clients that are spiritual seekers, like they're literally yogis, and I'm giving them sort of spiritual coaching, you could say. So it's like this one side of executive coach and this other more hidden side of spiritual coach. But when I look at a chart, I usually spend a good hour before I meet the client. So I analyze it, I study, I add up all the dots, I make the interpretations, and then I spend 90 minutes with the client. And I'm like, that's the amount of work it takes to really do something useful here. But on Tuesday night of launch, I was invited to be on a live AM radio show. And I've never done anything like that before. And, because astrology is in the category of the crazies in American culture, I'm on all these radio shows with like the UFO and the alien people and the conspiracy theorists and all this stuff. But there's interest. So this radio show was Coast to Coast AM. And they have 3 million listeners per week. Like it's a big show. And it's at night. So all of us yogis are asleep and the world is operating, right? And there's, ER nurses and doctors and late night truckers and paramedics and people who are working night shift at the factory listening into AM radio. It's like the most listened to night show in America. So I get on this show and it's live and they say, hey, would you do some live chart readings?
Oh, wow.
King. I don't know. That's past my ability to just do a live reading cold. I don't know the person. I don't see the person. They're calling into a radio show. They're asking a question, and I'm literally just pulling a Prashna chart for the moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I believe in Prashna. Like the moment you ask a question to an astrologer on a radio show is somehow the moment that is worth pulling a chart for and can answer the question. Really? Like if I know somebody and I pull a Prashna, then I'm kind of comfortable. So people call in for an hour. For 1 hour, people are calling in and quickly asking me a question about their life. Some of them have birth details, and I quickly pull up a chart. And I spend about 3 to 5 minutes a person. And almost every single time, the person on the other end of the line on this radio show would break down in tears, saying, "How do you know me so well? You see me. Nobody's ever seen me this way in my whole life." And
Wow.
it was a moment for me to realize like what power this system has.
And you're
That
using their birth chart along with the prashna or just the prashna?
one or the other, because I barely had time. Somebody would come on the line, and I was told you can't have any dead time on the radio, so I can't be sitting there like pulling like whatever was being barked out at me. I would just quickly enter, pull up whatever chart. Maybe I misinputted some of the birth data because I had like 3 minutes to do the whole thing, like 10 seconds enter the data and then give a quick talk. But every single time it led to some really powerful insight. And the next day I got inundated with emails of people saying how moved they were, how fascinated they were. And they were seeing it like, this is like middle America, late night shift workers, right? That have no concept of Jyotish or India or astrology or anything. And they almost thought I was some kind of psychic.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. I'm not. Like, I'm just adding up the system, right? And so then you realize like what a powerful tool to change lives, even in 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like that's the power you hold as an astrologer.
And that, and we were talking about this before, you have to be responsible with that power. Yes, we can talk about, keeping it secret, but I don't think that's necessarily the way that the world is moving. Okay. Just to decode everything and make it secret. I mean, this was the older generation's way of thinking, which was perhaps right for them, right? It was appropriate for them. But nowadays, nothing is secret. Everything is accessible. Like you want an answer to something, it's on Google. Like it's just, we're going more and more in that direction. So I don't think the answer necessarily is to keep it secret. The answer rather is to use it responsibly, right? Ethically, responsibly. And what is that? I mean, for me, that just essentially equates to having a spiritual practice. Because if you have a spiritual practice as an astrologer, you will intuitively, you will just go in that direction. Nobody will have to tell you, the 10, like these are like the commandments, like you must do this, you must. No, nobody will have to tell you that. You'll intuitively go in that direction. What do you think about that?
I mean, my morning sadhana, my morning routine is everything. In fact, I won't do readings in the day if I don't make the morning routine happen.
Yeah.
It's funny because today I had somebody want to have a call at 8 this morning. They said, look, I want to have a call with you. I want to have you do a book event at my yoga studio. And I was like, I can't do 8 o'clock because I'm deep into my routine. So sorry. And she said, well, I'm not available any time of the day. I said, well, then I'm not available to do the event. Sorry. And that's a big opportunity to turn down. Yeah. But the morning sadhana is everything. So it takes me 3 hours to get ready in the morning nowadays. I went from the business casual yogi, which was a 15-minute routine, start to finish to get ready for the day. And now it's a 3-hour thing. But, my yoga practice, my pranayama practice, my meditation practice, my puja, my japa, my chanting, my lighting diyas, all of that forms a basis so that when I come into the day, I'm reflecting the consciousness of the divine, which is what Jyotish means. We're reflecting the consciousness of the divine. So whether I get it right or wrong doesn't matter. It's in the divine's hands. It's supposed to be that way. So now, in a way, it takes the pressure off. It's like whatever I'm saying, that was what was meant to happen for you. So that's the divine. I'm just a vehicle of it. So the morning sadhana, in a way, the morning rituals and spiritual practices, you could say, somewhat is an insurance policy. Somewhat is a activation of spiritual energies, somewhat is a grounding, and definitely a protection of karmic messes that you can create, right? So you have to have that. I wouldn't practice astrology without the deep spiritual grounding. And I would say being a practitioner of yoga and meditation and chanting for the last 25 years definitely allowed me to accelerate in my Jyotish learning. Yeah. Because any one field of the Vedic system activates the other fields automatically.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do this unless I had that grounding myself. And before before giving readings and before really immersing myself into Jyotish, I had, for 10 years, I had and I still do, a Sudarshan Kriya that I do every day. And if it weren't for that, I wouldn't be capable of giving my best to this, right? Like, and doing it from a place of faith and devotion, right? Because I think faith and devotion is really, as you said, like an insurance, like a protection, like all of that, right? Because if it doesn't come from that sincere place and it doesn't come from that devotional place, then it's just an intellectual exercise. It's just an
That's
intellectual,
right.
and that in and of itself is not what, one ought to be, one ought to be giving guidance if that's where you're coming from, really. Um,
Yeah. We make it intellectual gymnastics. That's again part of this mindset we have of Western culture where you have to become the expert of everything. So you keep going deeper, 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 learning more. I need more. I need more. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I need more. And this intellectual gymnastics ruins the whole thing. And
yeah,
what I've found in Vedic system is the more you do the simplest thing,
yeah,
the more you access the more advanced knowledge.
yeah.
So if you want to become a very good mantra expert, all you have to do day in, day out is chant Om. That's it. Om. If you figure out Om and you really work on it, all the advanced mantras come to you. Same thing in pranayama. Just very simple deep belly breathing. Dirga pranayama, right? Dirga pranayama, fill the lungs. If you just do that pranayama, all the other pranayams get activated. You
Mm,
can't do Kapalabhati, which is a pretty advanced pranayama in the yoga system, without really mastering Dirga pranayama. Otherwise, you create problems. Same thing in yoga. The simplest asanas open everything up. You don't have to get into complicated poses to access.
mm,
And same thing in Jyotish. Just learn the 9 planets, develop a relationship with the 9 planets, understand them as a family
mm,
as your family.
mm.
Then Jyotish comes.
We say that they are the embodiment of Vishnu, right? So
Yeah,
if you approach it from that angle, you won't be able to not do this properly. Like, it will just come to you naturally, and whatever it is, you have to always leave the rest to your guru or your God, right? Like, you just, okay, this is, I've done my
yeah,
best. And that's important, right?
yeah,
Either to have a guru in your life, or to follow guru's teachings, or to do some rituals like you do, and to do sadhana, right? Like, we're talking about
yeah.
sadhana. So that, if we don't have that foundation, this is not something that is even worth getting into, because you don't do it for the money. I mean, I look, as similar to you, I look at the chart in advance, and then I, have the reading with the person. If I was to compare it to how much I can make as a lawyer, it's like, this is this is a lot more work in it. So, you're not motivated by the money, really.
Right.
Like, from another, it's coming from a different place. So this is
And I think it's a responsibility. I mean, for me, like I said, 5, 6 generations ago, I would say my family lost their way. Like, we lost our way because we were colonized. But if I go back 15 generations, 20 generations,
important.
then definitely the Chatterjis were the Chattopadhyayas. That was the original name. The British couldn't pronounce it, so they shortened and made it Chatterjee. And like, hey, change your name and we'll promote you. Okay, fine, make it Chatterjee. But if you go back originally, what the Chattopadhyayas did is they were the advisors of the community. We
Mm,
were known as the advisors. So to all the people in power, we were the ones who gave advice.
mm,
Now, 10, 15, 300, 400 years ago, what kind of work did you do as an advisor? Of course, you're doing Jyotish. Had to be, because Jyotish is the advisory science of all the Vedic systems. If you're a doctor, it was Ayurveda. If you're a medical healer, but if you're advising the kings of state, then it must have been Jyotish.
yeah,
So I believe, in a way, I'm just returning back to my ancestry
yeah, yeah,
before, and so I have a responsibility, right? And my recent ancestry created the conditions for me to have a successful career, to have a successful financial situation, to then say, you know what, I can make this work. I can honor my original ancestry, because the more recent ancestry at least gave me the artha to be able to support it. That's the right use of the platform. So I think that's the thing is, yes, you can make more money doing something, but do you need more money right now?
yeah,
After everything you've achieved, you can say, you know what, I need to give back to
yeah,
my ancestry and to society and to humanity. And even if I make less, that's fine. I'm doing my dharmic work. I'm progressing on the
yeah,
spiritual plane. I'm making some advancements. Material plane, maybe I've, ended that particular need, right?
yeah. And we need more astrologers like this. So it's good. Good what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's rare because in India the astrology system is quite broken. I mean, I've heard horror stories about people going to astrologers in India.
So corrupted. And this is why this is another reason, right? Like people shun it and like think, God, why are you even listening to this joker? Like this is why it's become a joke. It's because it's become so motivated by the financial aspect of it. But look, we have to say one thing. Look, I mean, we're fortunate in that we had, like you said yourself, you had that the financial what do you say, the stability already there.
Platform, yeah.
But if you don't have that already, and you have a family to support, what are you going to do? You know what you're going to do? You're going to sell people remedies that perhaps they don't need, but you're going to sell them remedies like expensive yagyas and gemstones, and we can't ignore the fact that there's a practical aspect to what is going on in the world, and we're talking about India specifically now, but we cannot ignore that, right? Because not everybody is in the position where they could just say that, okay, look, I can do this and I can give back, and it doesn't matter what I'm getting in return. Not everyone can say that, right? So we have to.
I mean, it's just such a good point, Anahita. Like, you have to have compassion for somebody who's trying to support themselves financially, and this is the gift that they have is Jyotish.
Yeah.
So, in ancient times, society understood the different roles of different people. So if you were doing rituals, or you were a priest, or you were a Jyotishi, or you were a musician, you were an artist, the society knew that, hey, we had to support you. They called them patrons of the art, right? So patrons of the arts or patrons of the advisors, doesn't matter which it was, but society knew that we must compensate, take care of these people, and in return, they will take care of us with their advice and knowledge and music and rituals and everything, and then we'll be able to be more financially prosperous, and we'll keep giving back. So the system supported financial security for all members of society because they all provided different roles, right? And today that whole thing broke down.
Yeah.
And, when you go into Jyotish, and many of you listening have faced this, you don't know how many times people want something for free from you. Like they're just like you have unlimited time in the day to respond to hundreds of people asking for free things all the time.
There's one more point I want to make, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this. What about your diet? Like, do you think that one ought to be, or at least try to the best of their ability to be vegetarian, or at least have a diet where they don't eat animal flesh, like, or do fasting? Like, what is your opinion on that, and how it impacts the ability to be a good astrologer?
Well, when I switched into becoming vegetarian, because I came from a very heavy meat eating family, and we would argue and fight over the bone marrow of the goat, then at the dinner table. And so when I became vegetarian, my family, of course, was freaked out. Bengali Brahmins prided themselves in the amount of meat they consumed, which I think is misguided. Again, maybe it's a colonial thing that came in. But I found that when I was a yogi and I gave up eating meat, my meditations became much deeper. Like the chittas, the fluctuations of the mind started to settle down a lot deeper when meditation would happen. And I noticed my overall anger and rage and sort of Martian type energy went down a lot. Since I've been a Jyotishi, I'd already been vegetarian. So I don't have the experience of making that switch. But I believe that, as a Jyotishi, of course, we understand karma. And so we're making this karmic equation. If somebody does something for you, how do you compensate them? Well, if an animal gives its life for you, how do you compensate that? And if you're eating a dead animal every single day, every single meal, how do you compensate from that karmically point of view? To me, that feels pretty overwhelming. Like, how many animals do I have to help to make up for all the animals that I slaughtered in my meat eating days? It feels quite overwhelming. So I think as we're moving towards the karmic balance, I think, and most enlightened and sort of sattvic moving people, meat is not a sattvic substance, it's tamasic, so it moves you towards tamas. And so if you want to take a sattvic approach, you want to help people spiritually evolve, if you eat less meat, if you reduce your meat intake or eliminate it completely, you naturally become more sattvic, you become more subtly aware. I believe you have more of that sattvic ability than tamasic. and of course, you don't have this big karmic debt that you got to pay off for many, many lifetimes to come. That's my thought. But, everybody's at a different place of consciousness. So wherever you are in your consciousness, do what you have to do. Like if you're...
It's not really a moralistic thing. It's not like a lecture judgment thing. It's just, as you very, very aptly pointed out, it does increase the sattva, decrease the tamas, which increases your ability to be more in tune, to be more intuitive, to be more connected. And it also stabilizes the emotional, I've noticed that anyway, since I stopped eating meat.
Definitely.
Like it was, I think it's been 12, 13 years. And like yourself, my whole family eats meat, right? Like they still do. So it wasn't like I was brought up vegetarian, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was because of doing Kriya. And all of a sudden I just lost the taste for it. It wasn't like I didn't force myself to stop. And it wasn't when I started doing Jyotish. It wasn't that, it was before that. But as you aptly I noticed the difference in how I am, right? And I think that's, so this is...
Yeah, I mean, when I started, it's funny because it was the book Sapiens. I don't know if you've read Sapiens. It's sort of this history of humanity, but it's all about the myth and storytelling of humans that make our societies. And there's a chapter in it about the violence that we as human beings inflict to animals. And so it made me really wonder when I read that chapter that, wow, I eat meat without thinking twice every single meal. Like I don't even think twice where it came from. What was the supply chain for that hunk of meat on my plate? And when I started thinking about the supply chain, I thought, you know what, I shouldn't support this mass cruelty. So let me at least switch to only eating meat from good sources that, it's a grass-fed or naturally taken care of. They have free range to run around. There's some humanity in the way the animal was raised, and then it's slaughtered, and then I eat it. So at least I made that shift first of cutting out factory farmed, horrific cruelty to animal kind of meat consumption. But then, of course, how often do you go to a restaurant? There's a decent source of meat. How often do you bring a decent? It gets expensive. So then it started reducing. And then I'd be like, wow, I've gone for 2 weeks without really eating meat. My meditation seems better. My spidey sense seems to be improving. Do I really want to break that, 2-week spell today? And so now it's been 8-9 year spell. And I'm like, do I really want to break it now? I don't think so.
Thank you so much for coming. It was lovely to have you, Vish.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Anahita. It was lovely to have this conversation with you. And just what topics we covered. That was fantastic. So fun.
Well, I wish you all the success with your book.
Thank you very much. And I hope to see you in Europe. I'll be doing some kind of a book event, hopefully somewhere near you. So we'll see how the year pans out.
That sounds great.
Okay. Bye, Anahita. Have a great rest of your evening.